My 24M boyfriend 25M fully believes he is an elf in a human's body. My boyfriend and I have been together for nearly a year. He's always been a quirky, nerdy guy into cosplay, fantasy novels, and role-playing games. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Recently, we've been a bit distant due to our work schedules and other commitments. Last weekend, we finally got some time to hang out at his place. He greeted me wearing pointed elf ears and a long, flowing cloak. At first, I thought it was part of a new cosplay or a themed surprise. But then, he sat me down and, after making sure I really loved him, told me something that left me stunned. I'm an elf trapped in a human's body. However, over the past few months, things have started to change. With both of our work schedules getting busier, we've had less time to spend together. I've been working long hours, and he's been diving deeper into his hobbies. I didn't think much of it at first, just figured he was keeping himself busy while I was tied up with work. Last weekend, we finally had some time to hang out. I went over to his place, and he greeted me at the door wearing pointed elf ears and a long, flowing cloak. I thought it was a bit odd, but assumed he was testing out a new cosplay or preparing for a themed party. We settled down on the couch, and after a bit of small talk, he asked me if I really loved him. Of course, I said yes, and that's when he dropped the bombshell, I'm an elf trapped in a human's body. At first, I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke, but he looked so serious, and as he continued talking, I realized he wasn't kidding. He explained that he's been feeling this way for a while and recently discovered the Otherkin community online. For those who don't know, Otherkin are people who believe they are not entirely human. He believes he's an elf because of his love for nature, his preference for solitude, and his ability to hear the call of the forest. He also claimed he could understand elvish languages and had started distancing himself from our mutual friends because he felt they wouldn't understand. I was stunned. I left his place shortly after because I had to go to work, and I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I kept hoping it was some elaborate joke, but when I got home, he had sent me links to websites and online communities about Otherkin. He told me he's serious about this and has even handed in his resignation at work because elves don't fit into the corporate world. I've been trying to wrap my head around this for the past week. I've limited our interactions because it's just too much for me to handle right now. His new online friends fully support his belief and have even suggested he start a YouTube channel to share his elven wisdom. They've been encouraging him to embrace this new identity fully, and it's making it harder for me to reach him. I don't know who to talk to about this because it sounds so bizarre. I love him, but I don't know if I can stay with someone who genuinely believes they're an elf. I'm also worried that he might be experiencing some kind of mental health crisis, but he won't listen to me unless I give him unconditional support for his new identity. I feel so lost and helpless. What should I do? Edit. I just finished reading through all the comments, and I appreciate everyone who took the time to give advice. Here are some additional points to address. My boyfriend and I have been friends for over 2 years before we started dating, which makes it harder to consider leaving him. Someone asked if he has a history of mental illness. To my knowledge, he doesn't, aside from some mild anxiety. I plan to reach out to his mom, who he's close with, to see if she can help. Reflecting on our relationship, I now realize he's shown signs of this for a while. He's been collecting elf-related items, and many of his cosplays have been elf characters. When I mentioned adopting a pet, he made a joke about elves not needing pets, which I now see in a different light. I don't know much about his online friend who thinks he's a dragon, but this friend has been part of his role-playing group for a year. So far, no drastic changes like building a treehouse or anything. When I asked about his plans, he sent me a list that included practicing archery, studying herbalism, and learning to play the flute. As much as it hurts, I don't see a future with him if he continues down this path. I'll be breaking up with him, but we'll try to stay in touch to ensure he's not heading toward a breakdown. I'm visiting him today to talk and officially end things, even though he's been avoiding me unless I support his beliefs. After that, I might need a drink or two to process all this. I've enjoyed the elf jokes, and I guess now I need to look up who Legolas is. Thanks again for all the support. Update 1. Thank you all for the overwhelming support and advice on my original post. I'm truly grateful for the insights and encouragement. As promised, here's an update on the situation with my boyfriend. After reading through the comments and gathering my thoughts, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with him. I needed to understand where this belief was coming from and what his plans were moving forward. So, I reached out to him and asked if we could meet in person to talk. He agreed, and we met at his place. As I walked in, I noticed that his apartment had changed quite a bit. There were more elf-related decorations, including tapestries of forests and mythical creatures, shelves filled with fantasy books, and even a small indoor garden with various plants. It felt like I had stepped into a different world. We sat down, and I started by expressing my concerns. I told him that I loved him and wanted to understand what he was going through, but I was also worried about his well-being and our relationship. He listened patiently, and then he began to explain. He told me that he had always felt a strong connection to nature and fantasy worlds, but he never fully understood it until he discovered the otherkin community. He said that the more he learned about it, the more he realized that he had always felt like an elf trapped in a human's body. He described feeling out of place in the modern world and finding solace in nature and fantasy. I asked him about his decision to quit his job, and he explained that it was a necessary step for him to embrace his true self. He said that working in a corporate environment felt suffocating and inauthentic. Instead, he wanted to pursue a lifestyle that aligned with his beliefs and passions. He mentioned that he was planning to start a YouTube channel to share his journey and connect with others who felt the same way. While I could see how passionate he was about this, I couldn't help but worry about the practical implications. I asked him how he planned to support himself without a steady income. He admitted that he hadn't figured everything out yet, but he was confident that things would work out. His online friends had assured him that he could make a living through content creation and by offering workshops on herbalism and archery. I tried to reason with him, suggesting that he could still pursue his interests while maintaining a job, but he was adamant that this was the only way for him to be truly happy. He also mentioned that his new lifestyle would allow him to be more in tune with nature and his elven identity. Our conversation lasted for hours, and by the end of it, I felt more confused and concerned than ever. He seemed so certain and committed to this new path, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing touch with reality. I told him that I needed some time to process everything and that we should take a break from our relationship. He was understanding and agreed, but it was clear that he hoped I would eventually support him unconditionally. After leaving his place, I reached out to his mom, as many of you suggested. I explained the situation, and she was understandably shocked. She told me that she had noticed some changes in his behavior, but had no idea it had escalated to this level. She promised to talk to him and try to get him to see a therapist. In the meantime, I've been staying with a friend and trying to focus on my own well-being. It's been a difficult and emotional time, and I'm still unsure of what the future holds for our relationship. I love him deeply, but I can't ignore the fact that this belief is impacting his life in significant ways. I'm hoping that with time and professional help, he might come to see things differently. For now, all I can do is support him from a distance and hope for the best. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Thank you again for the support and advice, it means the world to me. Update 2. Hi everyone, I'm back with another update. Thank you so much for the overwhelming support and advice on my previous posts. This has been an incredibly difficult situation, and your insights have been invaluable. Here's what's happened since my last update. After our long conversation and deciding to take a break, I've been trying to focus on my own mental health. Staying with my friend has been helpful, but it's also given me a lot of time to think and worry about my boyfriend. I couldn't stop myself from checking his social media and YouTube channel to see how he was doing. His YouTube channel has really taken off. He's been posting videos about his journey, his elven identity, and his connection with nature. He's gained a surprisingly large following, with many people commenting on how inspiring his story is. While I'm glad he's found a supportive community, it's also concerning to see how deeply he's diving into this belief. His latest video was a tour of his apartment, now fully transformed into an elven sanctuary, complete with a small indoor herb garden, handcrafted wooden furniture, and even a makeshift archery range on his balcony. I reached out to his mom again to see if she had managed to talk to him. She told me that she visited him and tried to have a serious conversation about his mental health, but he was very defensive. He insisted that he was happier and more authentic than ever before. She suggested therapy, but he refused, saying that therapy was for humans and he didn't need it. She's very worried but doesn't want to push him away, so she's been trying to stay supportive while subtly encouraging him to seek professional help. In the meantime, I've been doing a lot of research on otherkin communities and talking to a therapist myself. My therapist has been incredibly helpful in providing perspective and helping me cope with the emotional toll the situation has taken on me. She's explained that while it's important to respect his beliefs, it's also crucial to maintain my own boundaries and mental health. A few days ago, my boyfriend reached out to me. He wanted to meet up and talk. I agreed. hoping that we could have a more balanced conversation now that we've both had some time to think. We met at a quiet park, one of his favorite spots, and he arrived dressed in his elven attire, which is now his everyday clothing. He started by telling me how much he missed me, and how he hoped I could accept him for who he truly is. He talked about his YouTube channel and the support he's been receiving, saying that it's validated his identity even more. He seemed genuinely happy, but also somewhat disconnected from reality. I told him about my concerns, not just about our relationship, but about his well-being. I explained that while I respect his beliefs, I'm worried that he's isolating himself from the real world and making drastic decisions that could impact his future. I brought up the idea of balancing his elven identity with some semblance of a practical life, but he was very resistant. He told me that living as an elf is the only way he feels truly free and authentic. He sees his YouTube channel and his connection with nature as his new purpose. When I asked about his financial situation, he admitted that he's living off his savings and some donations from his followers, but he's confident that his channel will eventually become self-sustaining. We talked for hours, but it felt like we were on different wavelengths. Every time I brought up a practical concern, he countered with something about his elven identity and how it was more important to live true to himself than to conform to societal expectations. He also mentioned that his online community has been encouraging him to write a book about his experiences and possibly offer workshops on elven living. By the end of our conversation, it was clear that he wasn't going to change his mind anytime soon. He asked if I could support him in his journey, and while I want to be there for him, I had to be honest. I told him that I love him and want him to be happy, but I can't fully support something that I believe is causing him harm. I suggested we take more time apart to reflect and see if there's a way we can find common ground. He was visibly upset, but said he understood. We hugged and parted ways, and I've been feeling a mix of emotions ever since. I miss him deeply, but I also know that I need to take care of myself and not get pulled into something I don't believe in. I'm continuing therapy and trying to stay positive. My friends and family have been incredibly supportive, which has helped a lot. For now, I'm focusing on my own well-being and hoping that with time, my boyfriend might come to see things differently. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Update 3. Hi everyone, I'm back with what will likely be the final update on this saga. Thank you all for your incredible support and advice throughout this difficult time. Your words of encouragement have been a lifeline. Here's what's happened since the last update. After my last conversation with my boyfriend, we decided to take more time apart. During this period, I focused on my own mental health, continued therapy, and tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in my life. I've been staying with a friend who has been incredibly supportive, and I've leaned heavily on my family and other close friends. About 2 weeks after our conversation in the park, I received a call from his mother. She was extremely worried because she hadn't heard from him in several days. She asked if I had any idea where he might be, as she had tried visiting his apartment but got no answer. I immediately felt a surge of panic, fearing the worst. I decided to go to his apartment to check on him myself. When I arrived, I found a note on the door. It was from him, addressed to both his mother and me. The note explained that he had decided to embark on a pilgrimage to live in the forest for a while. He wanted to fully immerse himself in his elven identity, away from the distractions and constraints of modern society. The note provided some details about where he might be, so his mother and I decided to search for him. We drove to a nearby national park where he used to go hiking and spent hours combing the trails and campsites. Eventually, we found him in a secluded area he had set up as his temporary home. He had a small tent, a few supplies, and seemed to be living off the land as much as possible. He was surprised but not entirely unhappy to see us. He explained that he felt this was the only way he could truly connect with his elven self and find peace. His mother was understandably distraught, and I was struggling to balance my concern for his safety with my need to respect his choices. We spent hours talking, trying to convince him to come back home, or at least to a place where we could ensure his safety and well-being. He was adamant that this was what he needed, but he did agree to check in with us regularly to let us know he was safe. We also convinced him to keep his phone charged and on, even if it meant using a solar charger. After making sure he had enough supplies and promising to visit him regularly, we left. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but it seemed like the only way to keep a connection with him without pushing him further away. Over the next few weeks, I visited him several times. Each visit was emotionally draining, but also necessary to ensure he was okay. He seemed content in his makeshift forest home, even thriving in some ways. He had started a journal, writing about his experiences and thoughts, and was planning to use it as the basis for his book. Despite his apparent happiness, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't sustainable. Living in the forest with minimal supplies and no real plan for the future seemed dangerous. I continued to encourage him to at least see a therapist or counselor, framing it as a way to better understand and articulate his elven identity. Surprisingly, he didn't outright refuse this time, but said he needed more time to think about it. Around this time, I started noticing a shift in his online presence. His YouTube channel was gaining even more followers, and his videos were becoming more polished and professional. He was sharing his forest experiences, talking about living off the land, and even giving tutorials on archery and herbalism. His followers were incredibly supportive, often sending him donations and supplies. While I was happy to see him finding a sense of purpose and community, it also felt like he was being pulled deeper into this fantasy world. The more successful his channel became, the harder it seemed to reach him on a practical level. I was torn between wanting to support his happiness and fearing for his long-term well-being. Then, about a week ago, something unexpected happened. He called me, sounding more grounded than he had in months. He told me he had been doing a lot of thinking and had come to realize that while he still felt a strong connection to his elven identity, he couldn't ignore the practical realities of life. He admitted that living in the forest indefinitely wasn't sustainable and that he needed to find a balance between his beliefs and the real world. He said he was considering moving back to his apartment and trying to blend his elven lifestyle with a more conventional one. He wanted to keep making videos and sharing his journey, but also wanted to find a way to support himself financially without relying solely on donations. He even mentioned the possibility of seeing a therapist, as long as it was someone who would respect his beliefs. This conversation gave me a glimmer of hope. It felt like he was starting to find a middle ground, which was all I had ever wanted for him. We agreed to meet in person to discuss his plans further. When we met, he seemed more like his old self, still passionate about his identity, but also more open to practical solutions. We talked about how he could continue his YouTube channel and writing, while also finding a part-time job or some other form of stable income. He also agreed to visit a therapist, and we spent some time researching professionals who had experience with unique belief systems. For now, he's back in his apartment, still maintaining his elven lifestyle, but in a way that's more integrated with the real world. He's agreed to continue therapy and is actively seeking ways to balance his passions with practical responsibilities. It's a huge step forward, and while I know there will still be challenges, I'm cautiously optimistic. I want to thank everyone again for their support and advice. This has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but your insights have helped me navigate it. My boyfriend and I are in a better place now, and I'm hopeful for the future. I'll continue to support him as best I can while also taking care of my own well-being. Thank you all for being there for me. Like and subscribe for more stories.